Hi, good evening, everyone. Hello, can you hear me?
Hey, Marielle. Hey, Joe.
Okay. Thanks for his hi first. I wasn't sure if anyone could hear me. Everyone's like super quiet.
I'm trying to
Wonderful.
get,
Sorry for joining just now.
it's okay. I'm trying to get rid of my eyebrows. I don't know what's going on. It's like I have these.
That's a good look for you.
You like that? How about this
I
one?
do.
Yeah.
Or, oh my God.
Looking good, looking
What's
good.
this world come to?
Oh,
Is this being
goodness.
recorded yet?
Yeah, it certainly is.
We can't laugh. What can we do?
It's true.
That is very true. Okay. I don't think we have quorum just yet.
I like the shades.
How's everyone's week been?
Is tomorrow Friday? Wow.
Oh my gosh,
Thank
yes.
goodness. Yes.
It's been a week for me.
Another snowstorm. Well, you're at the UN, right? So you've been pretty busy with, are you involved with the Ukraine stuff?
I am not, but my colleagues are, and so yeah, they're definitely running around with their heads cut off, so to speak, dealing with that on the Security Council.
Wow.
Quite a bit happening there.
Well, God bless you.
Yeah. Did the president go your way today too, or?
No, so yeah, so I don't work for the State Department, and then I don't work for the UN. I work for the UK mission at the UN. So I work for the UK government.
The who government?
When's the Queen coming to town?
Oh, you work.
Yes, I work for the Queen, exactly.
Oh, that's cool.
Her Majesty's government.
That is right, HMG.
So you're the one that kicked Andrew out, right?
No comment.
No comment. I know.
I wonder if I always forget the number for quorum. Chanel, if you wouldn't mind helping me out. And while you do that, I'm just going to go ahead and pull up the agenda and we can get started as long as we have quorum.
10 on the committee. So
10. Okay, great. Thank you.
Oh, and Michelle is out sick.
Oh, okay. Is she? Okay.
Yes, I forgot to mention.
Okay. So we should be fine then. It looks like we have 6. Hope she gets better soon. Wonderful. Okay. Let me just pull up the agenda. I just lost it. Oh, here we go. Thank you for your patience, everyone. There we go. Yes, so good evening, everyone. I'll go ahead and turn on my camera. It's a bit weird to kind of chair a meeting without my camera on here. There we go. Hi. Hi, good evening, everyone. Today is Thursday, February 3rd. This is the Housing and Human Services Committee. It is 7:06 p.m. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Before we do, I just want to note that there is a change to the agenda. The agenda that was sent out earlier this week and late in this afternoon, the presentation from Senator Clear. That is not going to happen this evening, so that will most likely happen in March once we receive confirmation from the office. So can I get a motion to adopt the agenda with the removal of, what is it, point 3? Thanks, Bruce.
Second.
Oh, you can unmute, Bruce. Okay, thanks, Daryl. Great, I'll turn it over. Thank you with that. And so now we've adopted the new agenda. So Daryl, I'll turn it over quickly to you. I know that you're going to make a short announcement. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me start my video. There we go. Hi, everyone. I just quickly, I know I've spoken to Marielle about this, but my being chair was a temporary thing. So I have officially resigned as chair of the committee, but I intend to stay on as a member and continue the great work that you all do. And I look forward to working more with you all, and also just with Marielle, our new acting chair. And so congrats for that.
Bravo, Marielle.
Congratulations, Marianne. We can't hear you. I think
There we
you're
go. Thank you, Chanel. Yeah, so thank you, everyone. I'm really looking forward to continuing to work with all of you. Have learned a great deal from all of you. And it's really been a pleasure, and looking forward for us to continue taking the work forward. Again, I'm very much in an acting chair position, so I'm not, sure what will happen, but once we have more information on that, we'll be updated. Great. So with that, if everyone can just quickly, because we do have 2 guests joining us this evening, as well as for those who are probably watching live on YouTube, if everyone could just quickly state their name, brief introduction, and then we'll dive right into our agenda. Bruce, would you like to kick it off?
Sure, Bruce Robertson. I'm in downtown Washington Heights, and been on the committee for a couple of years, and love the excitement. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eda Santiago. I'm also been on this committee now for 2 years. I am an attorney, and one of the reasons I joined this committee is because I am passionate about just getting rid of homelessness. That's been a big passion of mine, and that's what drew me to this committee. So I look forward to a great discussion this evening.
Oh,
You're
Richard,
muted,
you're muted.
Richard.
I'm Richard Allman, who isn't used to being muted. I'm a CB12 member. I have joined this committee this year. My personal history includes work as a tenant organizer and heading affordable housing coalitions. My current daytime job is managing a senior center.
And Daryl Cochran, member of the community board for nearly 6 years and on the committee for the last 6 months or so.
Yeah, I'm
Aisha.
on.
Go ahead, Marshall.
After you, Aisha.
Aisha Ogilvy. I've been on this committee for 8 years and on the community board member as well for 8 years. Passionate about all things housing and human services and our community.
I'm Marshall Vanderpool. I'm the first vice president of Dyckman Resident Association, duly elected representative before New York City Housing Authority for the, I don't have the number, but at least 1,100 residents of Dyckman houses. I'm a public member, and I guess I've been serving a little while now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for your introductions. Just goes to show the wealth, knowledge, and information and networks that we all have, and to the how this is. I'm Meryl. I am on community now, and all the committee now for 2 years. Wonderful. So, Senator Clear's minus this point on the agenda is the community resource document. And so if you recall at the last meeting in January, we spoke about a particular incident regarding an outreach that a person had done on Facebook regarding community resources. And we as the committee felt that it would be really good to talk about, or at least come together with a community resource document, something that's live. And so thank you, Aisha, for recirculating the current board's source kind of directory that currently exists. And I know, Daryl, you also kind of shared a couple of links of what some of the other community boards do when it comes to and how they put that together. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the space just to have a conversation on that and kind of take it forward. If I recall correctly, we had talked about possibly using something like a Google spreadsheet, something that, maybe we could have, it's a live document where we could edit, be linked to other platforms that's not just on the community board website, because I don't think it does get a lot of kind of hits, so to speak. And getting that document out to as many community members as possible. Bruce, over to you.
So Daryl's linkages to various community board resource pages was very, very helpful and interesting. My question is, what kind of resources do we have in our staff at Community Board 12 to update the website on an ongoing basis? It doesn't have to be every day, it's periodic, because these organizations don't change that much, things don't change that much, but how does that work mechanically?
Yeah, I mean, good. I mean, that's something that I think should be part of this evening's discussion. And that I thought about was to, and I guess maybe before I jump in, can I just make sure that everyone received the email? Because I think there may have been some individuals who might have missed the email. I don't know if everyone received it. Maybe. Okay, I don't know.
Just as a postscript,
Okay.
there are dynamic links, and then there's a static page. A static page can be updated every 6 months or whatever. How useful is it? But dynamic pages need to be updated as resources come and go and events come and go. How much in the detail do we want to provide the community?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And again, to your first question about who's going to update it, because it's a big job. My initial thought was it could be something that all of us as a community board, not just this committee, because I do feel that we're all quite, well tuned to what's happening in different resources and networks and organizations that exist. And just really kind of ask, on a regular basis, maybe it's, once a month or every 2 to 3 months, if they're familiar with any particular organizations, just to go in and update the document. With the expectation that us as the community board members are the ones who own it in terms of, again, updating it. I would imagine that the staff capacity is quite limited, but I know there's a couple of other hands up. I don't know who raised their hand first, so maybe I'll go to Etta first, and then Aisha, and then Daryl. Etta, go ahead.
I do believe Daryl was before me.
Okay.
Sorry, let me look. Sorry.
We can come back to you, Etta. Okay. Okay, so Daryl, I'll call on you, and then after you, Aisha. Thanks, Aisha.
Oh, okay, great, thanks. Yeah, and I'm sorry, this is like a stream of consciousness type thing, but just having gone through all the different community boards resource pages, I definitely saw what I thought were some best practices and some maybe practices we want to avoid. Just to give you a sense, like some of them, excuse me, had had categorized their resources, like housing, food resources, you know, things of that nature, kind of getting very specific. I saw others that I thought weren't so helpful in a way. They just kind of listed names, addresses, phone numbers, websites for an organization and listed them in alphabetical order, but didn't say at all like the type of work that they do. So I didn't find that very helpful. There were, what was interesting to me too, and I honestly have to relook at our website for that, is some of them, when you link resources, it takes you to a place that helps people that want to apply for a liquor license, or help people that want to apply for some sort of variance in land use. So that was kind of lumped together with their resources. Some resources, as you can see in some of the descriptions I gave you, you really had to go through 3 or 4 steps to finally get to what eventually was the information that you might want for something like human services and the like. So definitely, in my opinion, I think we should have, you know, be able to click a button from the very first page that we have. We should be able, and then it should be categorized in some fashion. And then also I did see some went to a web page, whereas others went to a PDF. Some PDFs had had links that you could actually click on. Some had links that you could not click on. I found that less useful. I'm on the fence about being a website or a PDF, but as long as you can click on links, I think that's the important part and helps people better. But that was just kind of some of my observations from viewing all of that.
That's super helpful. Thank you. Aisha, go ahead.
So some of what I was going to say, Daryl has covered. But I feel, so I have some knowledge of it, having been the chair of IT and worked on some of the website changes. One thing that I think that needs to be addressed primarily is the fact that some of what recently was done has put an overlay of a website on top of the old website. And and I don't know exactly how it happens, but I have done certain searches and landed on the old information, including the old directory of our board members, people who don't even serve on Community Board 12 anymore. So something needs to be done so that there's not confusion, especially considering that our intention is to keep things updated. I do think that we should move more towards it being a part of the website with hyperlinks and not a PDF, because then you'd have to recreate that PDF every time in order to upload a new one, which is not effective. But definitely the hyperlinks, I agree that there should be a blurb about where those hyperlinks are going to take people and what they could expect to gain from going on those sites. So yeah.
Very helpful. Thank you. And if I'm looking down, it's just because I'm taking some notes and things. So thanks for that. Really, really helpful. Richard, please.
I would agree with most of what's been said already, but I want to focus on maybe a little different part of the process of developing a resource guide. I've done this for a couple of other organizations at different points in time. And I think my concern is that, not my concern, but my focus is that we put something out that we're comfortable having the credibility of the community board behind. You know, we are a part of government. And so I guess what I'd be thinking about in this was, how do we validate that this is, not just that one of us knows about a certain organization, but how do we validate that it's a service that we're pretty reasonable to say this is a good service that we want people to know about. And that actually takes quite a bit of research to do it. To do it well is doable, but time consuming. The second thought I have is that while there would be roles for all of us as committee members or as community board members, I think the process needs some coordination. That could be a very small committee of 1 to 3 people. Ideally, it would be staff, but I don't know if that's a possibility at this moment in time. The third suggestion I'd have is, what do I want to say? Rather than trying to reinvent the wheel, rather than trying to develop, and this is something I've found difficult in other organizations, rather than trying to develop a list from the start, from all of us tossing names in, any of a number of things like that, that we get what we think are the best lists out there, look at how to put them together, and then edit. I mean, there would be certainly things to remove from those lists as we look at the lists that other people have. That's when especially our personal experience would come in to say, how could we possibly overlook this organization? My sense of the best lists out there would be what elected officials have, what the medical center has, because they put time into this kind of thing, because they have their particular interest in being connected with organizations in the community, and anyone else that we think has been able to look at this in a comprehensive way. In some, on some things that are interesting to me, the city controller has put together good lists in the past. I'm aware of that particularly for how the city controller puts together lists of LGBTQ organizations. There may be some other specialized lists out there, but I think we will be able to be much more comprehensive if we start from existing lists and then start to edit, subtract, add. And at that point, we also start looking at our criteria over how big a list do we want this to be? Can we really handle all of this? Or are we looking for a narrower focus? I think what I'm doing with those questions is probably creating quite a bit of committee discussion. But I think we need to do that if we're going to publish something in our name.
For sure. I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I think that's kind of where we also landed a bit on the last conversation in January, which is, yeah, we definitely do not want to reinvent the wheel. We kind of want to lean on what's already there. And it does, some of it of what's already there does need to be updated. So for instance, the current resource directory on the community board website. Right now, it's just like a PDF with no links. And if I recall correctly, it's been a few weeks since I looked at it. It's not necessarily listed by type of resource. It's just kind of just a list. And it doesn't really say what the organization does. So it's just like the name, the address, the phone number, and that's about it. So I don't find that really helpful if I were looking for a particular resource within the community. I'd say who's this or who's that, and have to call quite a few. Go ahead, Richard, and then
yeah, I just want to add one thought there. It's sort of being self-aware of who we are as a board. We don't always operate as a unified board. 51 people seeing things exactly the same way. And I think in putting something like this together in the name of the board, we need to be really, let me speak personally, that we aren't just putting on their organizations, that I think are cool or that I know and trust the leadership. And I don't want to do that with other people too. We've got to get to some kind of common standard and some kind, and in that, I'm sure we'll discover some new and less established organizations. But it's just one more way of saying there's got to be some kind of common process here.
For sure. And would certainly agree with you as well. Us also kind of reaching out to the different elected officials. They, I think, their offices do quite a good job of compiling different resources that are available within the community. So leaning on that and what we currently have as a starting point to get things started. I think for me, more so before we even kind of dive into anything, is what can and can't we do, and what's the division of labor in terms of the, what us as the members and the community board at large can do versus what the staff can do. And so I think that's what it's on. And then I wonder if maybe Chanel, if you could come in and share from your perspective, if you have any insight on that. Thanks. Bruce, over to you.
Yeah, I agree 100% with what Richard is saying. I'm thinking this may be something to push up to the Manhattan Borough President's office, because why is there not some kind of standard for all the 12 community boards in the city? And the real issue is, the hidden agenda is like, is there money from Mr. Levine, President Borough Levine, to do this? And why should we have to bear the burden of it? And why not make it uniform across all community boards? Because it really is a great resource that, as Daryl pointed out, by sending us all these different community board links, they're all disparate. It's like, I go to one, it's a PDF. I go to one, it's a link. Why not make it uniform with community boards? What's the community board about? And then you advertise to the community members, yes, we have the most comprehensive resource guide in the city to what you need in your community, relevant to your community, but across the city. So that's my 2 cents.
That's a really great point. I didn't.
Is that a resolution? I don't know if it's a resolution or not.
Yes,
but I think
yes.
Richard says yes. So if Richard says yes, number 2.
I'll put my hand down. Bruce took care of it.
You'll put your hand. Great. So can I just really quickly, though, before we discuss that, I think that's a great point, because I do want to acknowledge Daryl has his hand up as well as Aisha, so would love to get their points as well. And then we can talk about possibly making this, as it sounds like there's kind of some idea or some consensus of possibly preparing a resolution to kind of suggesting the MBPO to kind of really take ownership of something like this. Daryl and then Aisha.
Yeah, just real quick. My thought too was maybe taking some of the onus off of us, and obviously we'll come with a first draft of a number of the usual suspects. But I think if there are other organizations, maybe there's a way to a button that can say, do you want to be included in the directory? And then you fill out, all this information, and then you can be included. It's not automatic. We would have, we could say yes or no, depending if we think it's helpful, or if it's, unfortunately, some organizations aren't, always above board, with their finances or other things. So we may not want to include them for a variety of reasons. But, I think if, we open it up for people to, just apply to be in the directory, I think that would be helpful too. We may see some places we haven't seen before.
Great. Go ahead,
So,
Aisha.
in regards to what Bruce said, I think what Bruce is saying is an excellent idea. I participated in the pilot review of BoardStat, if everyone's familiar with BoardStat and what it does, at the Borough President's office. And during that session, I asked about other opportunities to expand on that, because at that time I was looking into what I wanted to propose, and there is discretionary funds available for different ideas. Because one of the things that I said, not just related to a directory, but just in general, the fact that there's work left on the table, in my opinion, for the needs of the community, that the community board cannot be expected to do, and some of the elected offices are not doing. So if we wanted to propose something, how can we do that? And are there funds available, was my question. The answer was yes. From a technological standpoint, from hearing what Bruce said, all city database that basically filters per community board what is relevant to each community board is, in my opinion, the best idea that could come from this. And then it would live outside of us in regards to the need to be updated. And it can also have the opportunity for any entity that is not included to do so as well.
I see a
Yeah.
lot of applause
Yeah.
and head shakes. I was like nodding as well.
What is board stat? What is board stat?
Aisha, do you want to respond?
Accumulates the data of all community boards, things like police stats, if I remember correctly, or I know ComStat is one thing, but I believe that some of the police related statistics are included in there. Noise complaints, construction activity, things of that nature. I'll pull it up now though to make sure to.
And do we
cover
have
all
access
bases.
to it?
Yes, we do. And there should be trainings that happen for it as well. I don't know if they've done that this year or not.
Yeah, I'll add on to what Aisha just said on board stat, and maybe I'm confused because there's also another, if I recall correctly, there's another database, but there was a training last year, and so I sit on the licensing committee, and we find that quite helpful to be able to look and see the different establishments, the types of license, not just on the SLA website, but off of kind of comparing to noise complaints and police activity and so on and so forth. It's a great resource, and would certainly hope that there will be more additional trainings in the future.
I believe that this was also the vision of Aldrin Bonilla, if anybody knows Aldrin. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Aisha. Richard, go ahead.
Would a resolution be welcome at this point if it were offered in fairly general terms and took a week or two to shape it up into a resolution, into something that covers everything?
It looks like Bruce agrees. We'd love to hear from
I
others.
move we make a
You move-
resolution.
Can I get a second?
And we have a really smart Aisha who knows how to phrase this so that it makes sense on a broader scale.
Can I get a
I
second?
could
to
work on
Bruce's
language.
motion?
I'm glad to. Could I take it a little bit more specifically, Bruce? That I think at least picks up some of the discussion that we've had so
Well,
far.
Aisha said it. It's how do you create a database for all the community boards to provide resource information to the local community, but it's got to be stratified by somebody who logs in from CB12. I don't know how. Aisha, help me out here.
Yeah.
How do you
I mean,
how do you particularize it?
the general idea is, like, for instance, there's a website for law help. I think it's either Find Law or Law Help. There's two different ones. I always confuse them. It might be Law Help. But when you go on it, you can put in, this is where I live, this is my zip code, and it narrows down, here are the legal aids available for your area. And then you can say, I want employment related legal aid, et cetera, et cetera. So the same concept, but on a broader basis for all resources, so that when a person gets a link, they're not going to go call 15 agencies that say, oh, you're not in our catchment. It automatically is going to be able to pare it down so that they'll get exactly what they need.
I think Mark Levine, frankly, would love this.
I do too.
Absolutely. He's very tech forward. Very tech forward.
It's a real borough president type of responsibility, and I think in a resolution, we're asking him to lead, the borough president to lead this,
Yes.
to coordinate existing borough-wide information, to identify community district information in the 12 community districts in Manhattan, to utilize, I'm not quite as savvy on some of the descriptions here, but to utilize existing data, identify data gaps, and coordinate a project. That.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Daryl has already identified the data gaps. with the links. Everybody does it differently. How do we coordinate it to make it uniform? That's
We
what the
don't. We asked the borough president to.
right. And he's got the money, so he's going to pay for it.
It needs a staff person on it. It really
for
does.
sure, for sure. Great. No, thank you all so much for this conversation. I think you're exactly right. We were clearly seeing that just coordinating amongst Community 12 resources, it's quite a heavy lift, and there really is a need for something a bit more centralized, and I think something that's also live, something that people can look and filter and say, this is what I need, and be able to find that information in real time.
And
Great. So if anyone
we have
wants
a
to go
data
ahead
geek
and
who can make it happen.
yes, we do have someone with the expertise, so we're leaning on you, Aisha.
I pulled up board stat. It's actually more comprehensive than it was at the point that I was involved in the pilot. And it has all sorts of things like abandoned bikes. It's complaint related. So abandoned bikes, advocacy needs, air quality, Alzheimer care. It's intense from what I knew it to be, which is a good thing.
But
And the interface is actually much more friendly as well.
Is it public facing?
Yeah, I'll send everybody the link.
Thank you.
Anyone can use that.
We would add
Great.
nonprofit, public health, everybody else services to that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and that probably needs to get into the resolution.
Exactly. Yep, exactly. Listing out the types of
It would be a separate thing from this because this is strictly complaints. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Never mind. We don't want complaints. We want optimism. We want help.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
But how to file those complaints is an important resource guide component.
So that's a link. That's a link on our resource guide or the city's.
Yeah. So to
And-
me, it sounds like,
Other than
so once
311,
this thing-
people are frustrated with 311. I gotta say.
Yeah.
If you look at
Oh,
board,
And
yeah.
just to jump in real quick too,
Please.
Richard had referenced the city controller's LGBT guide. I put that link into the Q&A. It's really weird how we have to use this sometimes. It's under, there was another link that anonymous attendee put. I answered it with another link because that's the only way we could do it. So you can see that, what it looks like. And it's interesting. They have sort of a hybrid. They have the original website, and then there is a PDF function as well that'll like take you to a guide you could print out as well. So that's an interesting thing that's already done citywide.
for sure. Thanks,
Chanel,
Daryl.
Sorry. Are we able to have the chat functionality? Because that would allow for us to all be able to drop links during the meeting. I think that would be useful.
No, unfortunately, we can't have the chat on. I'm not sure of the reason right now, but just the Q&A is available.
Does
What
somebody
you
save
can
the
do, though,
Q&A?
So
We
just
have had it in
one-
the past, but yeah.
Yeah, just 1 second. Just wanted to kind of acknowledge there is again someone in the chat. If you look at under the answered tab under the Q&A,
Right,
that's where
yeah.
Daryl put in the link. And then if you look at open, one of the guests has also kind of made some suggestions on some of the categories for us to include in the resolution. So food assistance, crime prevention programs, mental health programs, so things for us to put there. And they've also asked to include the link to board stat. So Aisha, if you wouldn't mind, you can kind of, click answer and maybe pop in the link to board stat there, and we should all be able to see it and access that. But I do want to kind of come back to, Aisha, you're muted.
Oh, I was just saying I didn't realize multiple answers could be answered to one question.
Yeah, no worries. I do want to actually come back to officially have someone second, because I don't think anyone did second the fact that we want to do this resolution now that we kind of clarified what we're doing. So first, can we get a motion on the floor? Oh, hold on. Okay, so your motion.
I think Bruce got something started and we added a few things to it. Should we start from scratch again and try to turn it into a little more of a motion?
Yeah, so I
A formal
move that.
record, yes.
Yeah, I move that the board consider a resource database for our community and reach out to other resources like the Manhattan Borough President's Office because it's sorely needed. How's that?
I'm actually going to respectfully disagree a little bit there.
Go ahead. Go for it, Richard. Go for it.
All right.
Do you
I
want to put
think-
the motion on the floor, Richard?
I think the core of what we're doing is asking the Manhattan Borough President to coordinate a process for this, and then we go into the detail of it. But
Mhm.
it isn't us asking for help with our thing so much as, I'd say that's a subset. So,
I
It would
respectfully
be-
disagree.
okay,
We need
Go
a
for it.
Well, I
resource.
would,
We need a resource
So, if I
database
can-
for our CB12, but
So-
we've recognized that why not take it to a higher level so that it can be a Manhattan-wide effort to coordinate with other community boards so that anybody who goes to a particular community board database gets what they need specifically, targeted.
I think we're finding good ways of saying the same thing in different words.
Yes,
All
if
the
I may
words
come
work.
in, Daryl, just give me a second. If I may
Sure.
chime in, what I understand from the conversation is, we're really kind of looking towards MBPO to, again, kind of coordinate and lead a project that will standardize how each community board pulls together their resources. And this particular project will take the form of a website where, individuals can log on or, access the website and be able to filter the different resources that are then available in their community. So if they look up Washington Heights, they'll be able to see things related to food, mental health, so on and so forth. If they look up, Lower East Side, they'll also be able to do that. I just want to make sure that's what I understand. So we just want to make sure we're on the same page, that we're agreeing to the correct
You are so
thing.
the diplomat, Mario.
Thank you. Thank you.
You
Daryl,
couldn't
I know
find-
that you wanted to come in.
yeah, no, just real quick. I think everyone's right in this is that, and I don't want to make more work for us, but there's a kitty. There is more of an immediate need, right? I would think that we would kind of want to have this for our community sooner rather than later. It could probably be something that could be accomplished by the end of the summer, versus what the borough president can do. And no offense to the borough president or his office and staff, but that's probably something they won't be able to finish for in like maybe 2 years. I'm just like trying to be realistic and
But then that gets back to what are the resources of our staff and who's going to
Yeah.
pay for it. And you need a programmer, a website person. I don't know who manages our website. So, it's complicated. If we're going to do it right, if we're not going to do it right, let's not do it at all. If we have to do it right, we have to see what the resources are. I think Levine's office will get back to us fairly quickly. And if they think it's not worth it and there's no money, then we'll do it. But we'll figure it out as we go along.
So,
Yeah.
so I'm hearing
and
two
we could
different
ask
asks.
Ebenezer, like what he thinks our resources are internally in terms of something like this, because we do have one. It's just I don't know the work that went into that one.
Yeah. So I just want to make sure I'm hearing two different asks. So one, we're seem to all be in agreement with kind of the resolution prompting the MPPO to kind of lead this, borough-wide and potentially city-wide type of resource, and create this platform, which again, I would agree with Daryl, will probably take, quite some time to pull together. And then I'm hearing a separate ask, something that's more specific to us now because the needs are, immediate. Am I understanding that correctly? And if so, let's first vote on the resolution and then we can discuss the community board kind of immediate needs and what that looks like.
Okay. I move we vote on what you just said.
So will someone like, okay, so I just
So-
want to make sure.
Aisha,
If I
Okay.
might, I think a good first step is to find out what data exists. And if there's already what's called an API, which is, and I always forget what the freaking acronym is.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
it's
Um,
a An app.
It's an application programming interface, right?
Right.
It's basically database of vast amount of data that can be pulled into any website. So if the data is already somewhere, right, and through open data, it's readily available. I actually have a login for the developers portal for New York City. Then it really is just a matter of somebody building up an HTML framework and linking it to the API. It could actually be done in hours.
Right, but who's going to pay for those hours? That's the question.
I don't want to commit myself, I have to be honest, because I'm in school now as well as working.
It shouldn't be
But
on you. It should be
I'll do
on
some
us.
searching to see what kind of information exists. It probably is some of the information that already exists within the New York City websites themselves. And 311, for instance. And then it can be pared down to be more specific for what we intend to be raised to the community level.
So I have a
So
question.
Just,
I have a-
just 1 second, Bruce, if I may, just 1 second. I
Okay,
first just want to talk
sorry.
about just the resolution. It sounds as if like there wasn't like a proper motion on the floor because, we've had several discussions. So if we could first vote on that, and then we can go into details about what the specific community board resource would look like, because it sounds as if there's an interest in still doing that. I just want to make sure, again, that I'm hearing correctly. There's different conversations happening, and I think we're missing each other. Richard, please.
I think that this in a number of ways, the ways to access data that Aisha has suggested are important to this. I think they can be referenced in the motion as the motion is as the resolution gets developed. And if Aisha or any of us starts to get a couple steps ahead and offer some of this to whoever's coordinating the project, amen.
So I have a question for Richard, if I may. Okay. Uh-oh.
I'm not sharing, I'm smiling.
Marielle's frozen.
Sorry, so it's me.
So
I missed.
Richard, you manage
Sorry.
you're the
Sorry,
director of a senior citizen center. How do people find you? Do you know how they find you?
Good question. The Department for the Aging maintains a database of senior centers, but the great majority of senior centers have some kind of either neighborhood or religious or ethnic roots, something that connects people to them in some additional way. I think it's a good example. I think it would be great if that information, I don't remember the numbers exactly, but I think there are something like 9 senior centers, maybe a little more in the CB12 area. I think it'd be great if someone could access that information in one place. They can if they think to go to the Department for the Aging, but we're trying to get on the ground a little bit more.
Who would know that if they didn't know that?
You're raising all the
Hello, can you
questions
guys hear
over
me
how
now?
we're going to market this database. That's
That's where I come
story.
from. I'm a marketing guy. I want to get communication to the people, to get resources to the people, the easiest way possible. And this is a great way that I see that is lacking in our community and probably across Manhattan. Thank you.
Sort of like what a community board should do.
Thanks, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Because my internet seemed to have gone out at some point. Yes?
Just to help the chair, may I call the question here?
Can everyone hear me okay? Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. Sorry, I'm like so confused. Richard, go ahead. Oh, Richard froze now.
Oh, no, all I was saying was I call the question. I want to help the chair move this.
Yes, thank you. I would like to move this along as well. Great. So now can we get a motion on the floor to pass this or kind of agree to write this resolution
We're doing it right now.
Yeah, I think the motion's
Yes.
there.
Richard
Great.
made it, and I think Bruce is seconding.
Okay, great.
Oh,
Thank you,
Question's been
Bruce.
called. It
I
needs a
thought it was
vote.
my motion. Whose motion is it?
Bruce Robertson. Bruce Robertson.
Bruce Robertson motions. Got it.
Second by
Second.
Richard Allman
Aisha.
seconds.
Aisha seconds, right?
Second.
Okay.
I
Okay.
second.
Great. Thank you. Will kind lead on putting the language together. Thank you for that. And if anyone wants to support on that, please reach out to Aisha. I think we kind of already discussed what it can look like. Already kind of giving some bits and pieces of language that we would like it to incorporate. Great. So now moving on to the bit of, and I dropped off for a moment, so apologies if this was discussed and I missed it. We also talked about the community board 12 specific resources. We need kind of the need to update what we have, immediately, because clearly there's a need. I guess my question is, I know we're talking about kind of making it live. I wonder if are we duplicating efforts? If it is that the MBPO will take this forward, even if it won't be ready in a year or two, or should we, and this is just a question of feedback, or should we kind of lean on something that's maybe not as intensive as in terms of like labor intensive that we can put together in a month or two to be able to really get it out as soon as possible? Any thoughts on that? And I think part of that is then my original question, which I asked a while ago, which is what can we as the community board members do and what can the staff office help us with? Bruce.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to do it anyway, because what we just discussed, which is our community board is going to recommend resources to this overall database if it ever exists, so we can just do it temporarily for resources like Richard's Senior Center, other seniors. We need to know who's out there and get familiar with them so that we can recommend them to, the larger public at a certain time when that comes up. And if we have a process for that, how are we going to judge? This gets a little bit dicey. How are we going to judge who gets in, who doesn't get in? I don't know how that works.
Bruce. Okay, I think that sounds sensible. I think what needs to happen is liaising with the office staff in terms of what that looks like, and who's responsible for what. So obviously they, if it's going to sit on the website, we would need to liaise with them to have access to do that, and who would do it as well. Chanel, I don't know if maybe you have any kind of insight on any of this. If not, I can kind of reach out to Ebenezer and ask.
I'll reach out to him and ask.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I thought you had your hand up earlier. I'm not sure if you still wanted to come in or not. Or was it another
Marshall?
time?
Yeah.
Sorry, who was it? Marshall? My Zoom is being weird. Okay, great. So great. So Aisha, you'll go ahead and kind of work on putting together the wording for the resolution. Chanel, you're going to reach out to Ebenezer to see what's feasible in terms of who can do what for the kind of specific community board 12 needs. I think us as a committee, what we can do is start kind of compiling the resources that we already know, leaning on, as Richard mentioned earlier, kind of what's already there, which is the existing community board 12 resource directory. It's on the website. And then reaching out to our elected officials and asking them for kind of resource lists and things like that, that we can kind of lean on as a start to identify some of the resources that exist. Does that sound like kind of good action points for all of us on those two bits?
Yes.
Okay. I was like, I don't know if it's let's be frozen or great. Thank you, everyone. Bruce, you have your hand up.
No, I just said yes, I agree.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Great. So moving on to the next point on the agenda, I've put on here, and I just lost the agenda for some reason. Let me see if I can find it. I think it's discussion on homelessness or homeless shelters. I forgot what was put down. Sorry, I'm trying to pull it up because I lost it. Here we go. So this item, yes, so discussion on homeless shelters. So I put this item on the agenda in regards to I'm sure you've all been kind of watching the news lately, but there was some discussion from Mayor Adams on the need for more shelters in the city and what does that look like, and making sure that shelters are not just in some communities and others. I haven't looked into kind of the full story, and I'm not fully read up on it just yet, but I did think it would be good for us to start having a conversation around it, and would kind of welcome your thoughts. I wonder if, and again, I don't know, I wonder if there will be some kind of community input process, for what this looks like or what it could look like. Again, just a starting point of a conversation. Open to whoever wants to kick off.
So I have to be honest that while I was looking at some of the APIs, I missed part of what you were saying. So I was hoping to hinge on someone else responding so that I can then jump in if I have my own opinion. But if you could repeat that, sorry.
Not a problem, all good. So I was just mentioning, in the last couple of days, I've seen in the news that Mayor Adams has been talking a lot about homeless shelters, and kind of the need for more homeless shelters to address obviously the homelessness that's, in the city, and the link to, the crime that we're seeing, and so on and so forth. And so part of that, from what I've seen, and again, I'm not fully read up on it, but part of what I've seen is, the need to ensure that with the increase of homeless shelters, that it's across all communities and not just some. I think that's always kind of a very dicey, kind of controversial topic that people get quite heated about, saying, homeless shelters are only in some communities rather than others, and so on and so forth. Again, I'm not read up on it, and I don't know what kind of the mayor is proposing and what that would look like, and or if there are any opportunities for community input on this process. So I just wanted to put it on the agenda to kind of hear feedback, if you have all heard about it or have any thoughts. Maybe you have, kind of more insight than I do at the moment.
I did see, I'm sorry, I didn't raise my hand, but I did see some things bubbling up about that. First of all, I want to say housing is a human right. And I feel that our city and many areas of the country are remiss in creating a better model to address homelessness. There are several individuals that I've advocated for over the years who have unfortunately fallen into homelessness and unfortunately are still living in shelters for years now. The pandemic, to an extent, has kind of saved them, because there's not like a push to push them out. They're kind of able to quote unquote shelter in place now because of the pandemic. However, having had conversations with one or two recently, there is a anxiety that once things go back to quote unquote normal, that urgency to find a place to live will exist all over again. And some of the difficulties that existed prior were the fact that vouchers were not sufficient in order to find housing in a market where housing is extremely expensive. So building more shelters, is that even the answer to this epidemic that we find ourselves in, is my question.
Thanks, Aisha. Good point. Daryl?
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback on that question because I think it's so critical to this conversation. But a few things. One, I think one of the impetuses behind the resource guide we were just talking about is also including alternatives to shelter. So, and having people being able to access that information. So what are the alternatives to shelter? Also, I would say, having basically a 9-to-5 job, commuting every day, I see, probably between here and downtown, at least half a dozen, homeless individuals every day, often the same people. Why is it that they're in, the 181st Street station? We do have shelters. What is insufficient with them? I know that safety is a big issue for a lot of individuals. But so is creating more shelters again. Is that the answer? And I don't think so. So that's my 2 cents.
And if I could jump back in here, I feel like I did a survey recently. I do surveys as a part of one of my gigs, which was basically interviewing people about their knowledge of the health ecosystems that exist. For instance, New York Presbyterian Hospital that has many satellite sites that provide all sorts of services under one umbrella. And I feel like government is remiss in having that kind of model where the agencies that provide resources, specifically human services and housing, work closer together. As I mentioned in a previous meeting, Ariel held a meeting that was about homelessness, and many representatives of city agencies came, and they all admitted to the fact that they very much work in silos and that it is a problem, and that people fall through the cracks simply because one hand doesn't know what the other is doing. And I think that shelter obviously being a necessary thing, what is even more necessary is a model that is making it easier for people to subsist using the resources that are available. There's a lot of waste and mismanagement that goes on simply because one hand doesn't know what the other is doing. And if we address that, we could probably help more people quicker and get people off their feet.
Thank you both for your comments. I mean, I would agree, and it's kind of, a holistic approach. It's not just housing that people need. Like if you also don't have the means or the resources to, help find, meaningful employment, then, like how do you, it's kind of a vicious cycle, and really thinking about it, through a number of things. And I think there's also obviously a visible difference, or an important difference between that we sometimes don't see there, there are people living in our shelters. They would be sitting right next to you on the train and you wouldn't even think that they're homeless. They may not, be, kind of in, complete, rags, or, kind of carrying back, their belongings along with them. But there are people who are homeless and are still working. And, how do we also address that community as well? And so I think what I would like to do, and I also would love to hear, from Marshall and Etta and Bruce and Richard, if you have any thoughts on this. I would like to see if there's some sort of community process to give input, or I don't know if there is. Again, I was just reading. And so maybe there's a point I can kind of follow up with Chanel in the office to see if you have any information on what this looks like, and if there is a full process. Again, I don't know if it does exist or will exist, but it doesn't hurt to find out. But I do want to give an opportunity for Bruce, Marshall, Richard, and Etta, if you want to chime in on this.
I mean, I think the conversation has addressed. I'm sorry, I didn't see you raise your hand, Richard. I'm so sorry.
That's fine. Go.
I think the conversation, like Aisha, okay, I don't know if I'm frozen. The conversation is not just about shelters, right? I mean, that is like the most basic emergency need. We're really talking about permanent, affordable housing, but addressing as well as like unemployment, like being able to maintain a sustainable, being able to live on your own. I think one of the issues, in addition to just agencies not talking to each other, sometimes, okay, let me take a step back. If you're apply for unemployment, there should be automatically of like, hey, you lost your job. Okay, what other services do you need, right? It shouldn't really be on the person like, let me tell you, going through unemployment process itself is a pain in the butt. Like it really is. It is burdensome. It is a lot of bureaucracy if you don't have all the paperwork, and then you do that and you're trying to pay the rent and you can't do that, and then you have to go through HRA and through other services, and then you most of the time you don't qualify unless you're already in eviction proceedings, although they did change that a little bit during COVID. But it's really stacked up against people. So a few things in addition for the agencies to talk to themselves is like gathering information. It's not just housing, right? If someone loses their job, okay, are you going to need this? Like it's almost automatic unless the person says, no, I don't need this. Like, okay, we're going to refer you to this agency, to that agency, and they'll contact you. Because if someone's lost their job, their ability to potentially pay rent, their ability to potentially get food, that might go out the door. They just don't have the time or maybe know where to go to get all these other resources. The second thing is agencies need to go to where people are at. You know, when I worked at the Legal Aid Society, one of the big issues was we're asking people, especially people that don't have these cushy jobs, to have to take a day off to just sit around an HRA office or to go to this office or to go to that office. And if they don't have all the documentations, to come back. And it's just a very inefficient process. And again, I do know during COVID, things were adjusted and that we were able to move some of it remotely, but understanding that not all of our community members have either the access or the knowledge of using all these services, these remote services. So I would really, really love to see, at least in our district, having these like units that are coming into the community, either connecting with schools, connecting with community-based organizations, and going to where people are at, as opposed to asking people, hey, take a day off from work, potentially get fired and risk many other consequences, come into our office, and people might not even know where the offices are. People get very overwhelmed. We should be making it a lot easier. I'll give you an example. The ERAP process, the emergency rental, I never understood why didn't we just partner with, I know people hate landlords, but hear me out. Why don't we have people going and say, all right, landlords, who are the people, who's behind? Like, let's go into those buildings. Let's get them in, as opposed to placing the burden on the tenants. Like everything is always on the person that's going through the struggle. And while I've never been homeless or have encountered those kind of struggles, when I had struggles, I'm at my lowest point where it's even hard to get help. So it's like you're at your lowest point, you're struggling, especially if you have children, if you have other, responsibilities. And on top of that, maybe mentally you're depressed. That's okay to feel freaking depressed when you don't know how you're going to pay your rent or where your next job is going to come from. And we just don't give people a break. We're giving them all these burdens to do this, do that. I love the idea of having a resource page, and I'm glad that we're moving forward, but that's also placing like the burden on the individuals. Like, you go here, you see it's here for you. We should do that, because I don't think we should just choose one or the other, but we should have the resource directory, but we should also have a little bit more proactive approach from the government. It's for the people, so go out there for the people, as opposed to waiting for the people to go to you. So I'm done.
So how do we do that, Etta?
I was just going to chime in and say, I that sounds like a bit of an action point and maybe a potential project for the committee. Maybe it's a drop-in clinic of some sort where we invite, these agencies to come and say, every 2 or 3 months, we're going to have this, but then not just on here, because I think as you mentioned, not everyone knows about the community board. Not everyone has access to Zoom and things. And how then can we encourage them to do things in person as well? Just really quickly, Etta, and then because I jumped ahead of Aisha and Richard, so apologies. Go ahead, Etta.
I just wanted to say bravo to Etta, because that is spot on. Everything that she said multiplied times 10. And I feel like, in addition to what she said, something that she said jogged my memory about an experience advocating for a woman who was homeless with her mother and her kids. She was still working. Come to find out, the checks to prevent her eviction had been sitting on a desk at the Dyckman Center for months. She already lost her apartment. She can't get the apartment back now. So those checks did nothing for her, right? Because now she's got to find another apartment. So that kind of thing should never happen. But technologically, so my Social Security is attached to so many documents. If I go to legal aid, they take all my information. If I go to the Dykeman Center, they take all my information. You should be able to be aware of all the movements once you go and interact with the system and you apply. So what happened? Where is it in the process, right? So once those checks hit somebody's desk, she should have been aware. It shouldn't have been waiting for a worker to call her or realize that the checks are on their desk, and then she gets evicted because nobody ever does, because she should automatically get an alert that says it's ready. We have you. You know what I mean? You're not going to get evicted. So those are some of the examples of, what could happen using technology intelligently. So, and a lot of that can be applied to what Etta said as well.
Before I turn it over to you, Etta, to respond, I think Bruce and Richard also had something to say. I'm not sure if you both want to come in now, and then Etta and Marshall.
No, I'm
Sure.
done. I defer to Marshall.
Okay. So Richard, Marshall, is it okay if we can also kind of capture Marshall and then you kind of come back in, Etta, if that's all right? Thanks. So Richard, Marshall, Etta.
I'm going to start just the same way Aisha did, with bravos for what's been said, and for Aisha, what was added there. And I just want to focus for a minute a little bit on the tactical, what do we do question. One of the things and this is informational more than it is an action plan. I've been trying to follow what's happening with the new administration as they organize themselves. I noticed that that there's some things being done that look like they could help break down the silos among the housing agencies, that they're being set up in a way that coordinates some of the city housing agencies better. But at the same time, the Department of Homelessness was not part of that reorganization. So the housing part of it is, but homelessness is still, I think, seems to me like we should either try to do some real quick advocacy, which maybe might need to happen quicker than waiting for the general meeting, which is where resolutions go. Or we can watch for a month or two and see what's happening with the rest of the mayor's reorganization and figure out from that a little more how to target our advocacy. I think either way makes sense. To the extent that I know anything about shelter operators, there probably aren't very many of them that I trust particularly. One of the ones that I think reasonably well of, seems to be speaking pretty positively of this reorganization. But then again, maybe that's all politics. But I think it's just a question of everything that's been said is spot on, as was said, spot on in terms of what needs to happen. And just my question is, where do we go into this process? And I don't think it's completely clear.
Thanks, Richard. Marshall and then Etta.
Yeah, I don't know. I think what Etta said had a lot of credence, but I'm not sure if it's spot on so much in that in Dykeman houses, we have a problem with the homeless because the homeless come to sleep in our stairwells and on our roofs and hanging around, okay? And on the spectrum of life, they're not the ones who have lost a job or anything like that. These are the mentally handicapped, okay? This is part of the spectrum, or rather, if you want to put homelessness on the spectrum, you have those that have jobs or have a capacity and have a rationality that they know what they want to try and have a life and be a life and do a life. And then you have those that are just, and it's unfortunate, but are just there. And they're making it within their limitation. Back on, I'm sorry, I don't have my notes, but back in maybe July 13th, we had a meeting, and that's why I'm remiss with not having my notes, but we met with some city officials about, well, how do we address this? Because I'm not necessarily going to walk up to somebody who's going to be acting irrationally and try to speak with them and sort it out. I don't necessarily have the resources to do that. I call the police. They don't necessarily want to arrest them. They don't want to do a lot of things. I mean, we're at loggerheads as far as how we address the situation. So I hear what you're saying. You know, as those who chimed in to say spot on, I can't say you're spot on because there's still too many facets of homelessness. And I think the bigger facet of homelessness are those that don't have a capacity, that don't have a rationality, that don't have a vision on how they want to live and live their lives and seek out the help that they want. They're ready to just go on and come up to Dykeman because, I mean, it's been said to me, and I don't know, but they say, go sleep in Dykeman houses because it's safe there. Nobody will bother you instead of trying to sleep out in the street or any place else. And don't share that with anybody else. I don't need any more people coming up to my development. I'm gonna land my plane here.
Hi, Marielle, can I respond now?
Yes, go in and then I'll chime in and then Aisha.
So Marshall, thank you for bringing up, you know, the fact that obviously homelessness is, there's a lot of layers to it and there's just not one issue. You know, I do, you know, based on my experience, you know, doing my volunteer work, also working as a tenant rights attorney, and now I work at the Covenant House International. Homelessness, you know, we do see a lot of people struggling with mental health. But we also have a lot of families that are homeless, and sometimes homelessness can look a little different, right? Like the people you're describing who are really out in the streets and they choose to live in a building because it's safer, and perhaps they're struggling with mental health issues. Whereas we do have a lot of students, a lot of children who don't have a secure roof over their heads. So it's very complicated, and obviously we can't have the full-on conversation during our committee as to all the different reasons why people are homeless. I was coming at it more from a prevention, because I also like, we're always focusing on how many people are out in the streets and we need to get them into housing. We also need to prevent people from ending in that situation. And I think people sometimes don't acknowledge how easy it is for someone to become homeless. A lot of people are just one paycheck away from complete financial ruin and from being unable to pay their rent on a consistent basis. So that's where I was coming from. As far as the action plan as to what we can do, I don't think we'll come up with an action plan in this meeting. I think we'll come up with like bits and pieces. I do think that you know, we could look at to having sponsoring or working with different elected officials as far as like mobile units and, you know, spreading the word with our community-based organization, faith-based organizations. Again, it's very important to go where people are at, our schools as well, as opposed to, like you said, having people having to come to a community board event because that's only a very small part of our population. And quite frankly, if you're unable to pay rent, if you're going through a lot of hard times, maybe you're not coming to community board meetings. Another thing perhaps could be like a task force to look at applications, like government applications. When people, for instance, are submitting an unemployment application, does that ask you, you know, okay, so you lost your job. Does it automatically ask you like, are you having a problem with paying your rent? Like I did apply for unemployment. I don't recall those questions being there. It was very specific about my loss of income, how much money I was making, and that's it. It's very much like that silo, that very one-dimensional thing, as opposed to let's try to get this data. This person's already telling us they lost their income. So that's one example, and perhaps a task force that might not be community board level. That's something that maybe we could ask at the state level to put some pressure on these government agencies, both city and state agencies, to kind of review, right? Because all this, as Richard mentioned, we have a new administration, and I do know that there's been a concerted effort to bring the housing officials and have a bit more cohesion in the plan. But does that actually trickle down to people's experiences on the ground? For instance, when they're applying for FEPS, are we looking at things more holistically for each person? And I don't think so. And I mean, maybe that's where we want to go, and there's going to be some steps. So those are my just preliminary ideas that I wanted to share. Thanks.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you in terms of, homelessness looks very different from person to person, from family to family. And there's so many different factors, so many different reasons why someone can fall into homelessness. So I think it's important to kind of keep that in mind as well. And I think, I think we recognize how hard the last 2 years have been for everyone, and the impact that has had on mental health. It's unfortunate. And so there also kind of really needs to be a focus on mental health resources, for people in our community. And it's tricky, it's tricky. And so, and like you said, sometimes, you would kind of, the police officers aren't necessarily trained to deal with individuals who may be experiencing, a mental health breakdown, or maybe experiencing these issues. And so it's like a vicious cycle, unfortunately. But yeah, at least it does sound like we're moving in the right direction in terms of what something could look like. Just wanted to come in on what you just mentioned, Etta. I wonder if, kind of maybe as the weather gets warmer, and hopefully, crossing my fingers, things get a little bit better with the pandemic. And I wonder if there's something where we can organize an event with the elected officials, bring in these agencies and some of the, kind of popular community centers or community areas in Washington Heights and Inwood. Maybe it's, a community fair or something, right on kind of like, what is it, 171st, right before George Washington Bridge, that plaza, right by United Palace, for instance, where they have the farmers market sometimes. And we can identify a couple of other places. And, and again, kind of bringing it to the community in places that people will already be. And also kind of, and then sharing that information with the schools, making sure that the parents of, in our district are aware of these, these drop-in events or these fairs, so that if they, want to, they can certainly access some of this, and making it a little bit easier for people to have these, that access to the resources that do exist. So I'll let Aisha come in, and then I guess in terms of, it sounds as if that's kind of where we want to go, but I don't want to kind of speak for the entire committee. So would love to hear your feedback, and then would like to talk about what are the action steps to make something like this happen in, late spring, early summer. Aisha?
I just wanted to respond to Marshall in regards to people who are severe and persistently mentally ill, SPMI, as we know it. I understand what he's saying, and I agree with some of it. I do feel that what Etta has mentioned in regards to creating a safety net is definitely relevant, because, for instance, a friend of mine who was in the military could have fallen into that bracket, is extremely high functioning, very knowledgeable, father, works a great job, but he himself will tell you he could have fallen into that bucket. It took the VA 8 years before they said to him, maybe you might have PTSD. That's too long. So I feel like we can definitely improve on the systems that already exist, where people should be doing their due diligence to help, support, and protect people, and provide already existing resources. Some of this is not recreating a wheel. It's already there. It's just not being offered to the people where they need it. The other thing that I was going to say is, there is some aspects of government that are utilizing an idea like that. For instance, with HRA now has, and this may be an individual app, I'm not completely sure, or maybe like an individual company that is doing it. I believe it's called Fresh EBT or something like that, but it links to your HRA benefits so that you can see how much you have, other resources. It even promotes like job opportunities, opportunities to get a free cell phone and things like that. Also, when you go into the HRA website, it asks you, this board, I'm told by the borough presidents, took the lead on advocating for the Fair Fares program so that people of lower means can have car fare. at a reduced rate. I was the chair when I put forth that resolution. And when you go into the HRA website now, it asks you, do you need car fare? Do you want to apply for the Fair Fares program? So there are examples for this. And I think that that's very beneficial. And if that could be applied in more places, the way that Etta has mentioned, we'd be better for it.
Great, thank you, Aisha. Just keeping an eye on the time because it is 8:30 now. So can I take it that there's interest to organize some type of community event, late spring, I guess, early summer, kind of coordinating, maybe working with the elected officials, having some kind of community of some sort. It sounds as if there's a lot of interest. I just want to make sure that I'm getting the vibe right from everyone. I'm seeing shaking heads, as in yes, shaking heads. I see. Okay, great. So I think in terms of next steps, what would be really helpful is some brainstorming in terms of what agencies need to be present. And I think when we do that, just really, again, back to I think the points that we all made, really making sure it's holistic, that it's not just housing related. It's not just, this related, but kind of how do we link together different pieces? And then once we're able to identify those, I think at that point we can kind of come up with some kind of proposal of what the event could look like. And then of course, kind of engage with our electeds and see, how we can move some of that forward. Richard, I see you want to come in, please.
Yeah, just real briefly, as we've talked in some different ways about things that would probably be more categorized as homeless prevention, and we've talked about homeless services. Just as we refine this project, I think we need to keep in mind that there's some different targeting based on, which of those silos we're in.
Good point. Very good point. Important for us to keep that in mind. And if I understand correctly, it sounds as if we want to come at it from the prevention aspect. Is that correct? Etta, please.
Yeah, I think the prevention, maybe we could also just call it like housing security, because it's not just to prevent someone from being evicted, it's for people to be able, that's the ultimate goal, right? To keep people in their homes, but they should be safe homes. They should be quality homes. There's a little bit more about housing security. So yeah, but I agree with Richard, it would be a very different target population as opposed to addressing like the people Marshall is talking about, people who are already experiencing homelessness. Perhaps we could have something more targeted to them, but it would be a different type of outreach. That's true.
Great. So I've jotted that down. So we can all take as an action point between now and next month. We'll all do kind of our respective brainstorming, come back at the March meeting with kind of the list of agencies that we've identified. And then from there kind of put together that, what that concept note could look like, and making sure that obviously we're engaging our electeds as well. Aisha?
I just wanted to quickly, as a reminder, in a previous meeting, DHS showed to present some of the resources and just a little bit about how they function as an agency and how they push out into community to support in different ways. At that meeting, it was said that they didn't cover everything, but that they would return. So I think it would be good to have them do that, especially now that things have changed since then. There may be pandemic specific resources that they can avail us of. And also I feel like our board is remiss in making a connection with the VA to have an understanding of what resources exist there, what are the needs of that community. And so that I think that would be great if we could do that.
Thanks for those points. I'm also kind of capturing that. Richard?
The last thought there may actually be one of the things that we could do pretty quickly. Within the context of this committee, to figure out who's good. The city's got a Department of Veterans Affairs. I don't know how well that's been kept up, but The Veterans Administration exists. There's some veteran service organizations that are credible. I think we could either ask one or a panel of three and pull that together pretty quickly. It may be one of the most doable pieces here tonight.
And this would be, if I hear you correctly, this would be separate to the community, but kind of to bring them in, hear what's already out there, and then kind of again having that resource fair kind of later in the spring at some point. Is that correct? Yeah.
I
Aisha,
think
you
there's
saw
a- Please go
Go
ahead.
ahead, Urchins.
No, I was just going to say there's a lot of possibilities out of what we've said.
For sure. Okay. I guess that was an old Aisha. Okay, great. So I'll take it. We have obviously a couple of action points on this. I think your point is very well taken. Both of your points are very well taken in terms of reaching out to the city's kind of department, kind of focusing particularly on the services that are available for veterans, because that's also something that I think we're a little bit out of the loop of. Okay, great. Sorry, just looking at something in the chat. Wonderful. Moving on then. So any new business? No? Okay. Any business? Okay. I don't see any. Okay, so I see that Phil has two questions. Phil, Chanel, are you able to unmute Phil and give him an opportunity to share his points? Thanks. Go ahead, Phil. Thanks for joining.
Hello. Can you folks hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's old business. From the last meeting, Marielle and Daryl were going to give me an update on the remaining items from the Fort Washington Armory resolution from May, besides the public session. And we had email conversation for follow-up. So just wanted to mention here, so that if the others didn't know, that I was told that Carmen De La Rosa, who replaced Udonis, needs to be brought up to speed on that original resolution. And I was just wondering if there was any update in getting Carmen up to speed and where things are with now regarding that.
Sure. Thanks, Phil. So from that conversation,
Oh, you're muted.
You're muted, Mario.
thank you. From what I understand, the resolution needs to be sent to Carmen De La Rosa's office as well as Sean Abreu's office as well, so that they are aware. Obviously, she is familiar with the situation in her previous capacity as assembly member, but in this particular resolution, if you're, the call is on city council members. And so we do need to bring her up to speed on that. We also shared in that correspondence, if you recall, that we are in touch with the chair, Eleazar, in terms of kind of, shaping up. We've kind of collated all those different points that we discussed at the last meeting in terms of the public forum and what that will look like. And we have shared it with him. And so we're waiting for feedback on that. So, yep.
Okay, the second question I had was, has there been any communication with DHS and also with the the mayor's community affairs unit regarding that resolution? And if so, have they mentioned what they may be doing to move that forward? Just curious if there's been any dialogue with those two
Sure.
bodies.
Sure. To my knowledge, no, not at the moment, but it certainly is on our list. I think what we're again trying to do is first kind of figure out what this forum is going to look like and get that steer from the chair, as well as I mentioned, kind of get the city council members up to date on it. And then from there, go ahead and loop in DHS as well as the other stakeholders. I see Aisha, you have your hand up, please.
So I'm curious how this could work. As I was working with community members to shape the work that ended up being this formalized resolution by our board. One part of the research that we did was trying to gain an understanding of who was responsible and who could affect change in this matter. Unfortunately, that didn't make it into the resolution because through the process, there were still many ways in which I was left out of that process. So we are remiss in not including, for instance, the Department of Law and whoever else, whichever other entity of our city that was responsible for creating the original contract. How could we possibly leave them out? It is because of them that we understand the issue that is at hand. And so I don't know, once a resolution has already been formalized and sent out, how do we make sure that we add on that arm of our government to make sure that they're included in the process? And they can come and speak to what current best practices are, what the spirit of the contract was written in at that point, and whatever other tangents that may be relevant in that can be spoken to. They also could be one of the experts in our forum to speak to what, going forward should and can look like. Also, yes, as a mechanism, it makes sense that it would have to go back out to the current sitting electeds for our district, but there were many others that were also copied, and that those positions have also changed. So for instance, the borough president is now Mark Levine, and even though he was the city councilman at that time, do we need to refresh the resolution wholesome and just send it out to all the new positioned people is my question.
Good questions. I don't know about the kind of technicality of as you mentioned, looping in or adding on the Department of Law into it after it's been passed. I don't know if that's allowed or anything. So that's something we can look into. And I think you have a good point of, because exactly a lot of the other elected officials' offices have changed. I wonder if there is certainly a point for us to go ahead and say, if you recall, this is what we've done. You're now in this new position. You're now in this office. This is what, Community Board 12 agreed in May. We'll be in touch with follow-up. We're planning this forum, so on and so forth. Phil, you have your hands up, and then Daryl.
Isha, I apologize because my computer decided to get funky on me and I only heard part of what you said. You had suggested, and correct me if I'm wrong because I'm taking my notes, that we should get the Department of Law involved in the process. And was there anybody else? I just want to get the notes right here. I apologize.
And Phil, you may be able to remind me. I remember the Department of Law. Was there another city agency or department that was involved in formulating the contract that you remember?
I'd have to go back and look, to be honest with you.
Yeah, me as well.
Yeah.
And I just want to quickly, Richard Allman being one of the senior members on this committee, would this have to go maybe to the chair? According to the bylaws, once a resolution is passed, then the chair is responsible for advocating for it. So might that be the mechanism for doing some of this stuff that we're talking about, or how?
Humbly, I don't have a good answer for that question. I think it would certainly be worth Marielle having a conversation, whatever conversation she feels needs to be had or hasn't been had, or any variation on that, and come back to us and give some shape to the process from here.
Thanks, Richard. Daryl?
Yeah, just to that point, I think I believe, and maybe Chanel could or Marielle could speak to Ebenezer about this. I believe it's kind of just a technicality about the who the resolution was originally went to with the council member and whoever's in current office. And I believe that was something Jim, the parliamentarian, had mentioned to me, was that It's just a matter of us sending it to the current parties that were in that role, because we were really sending it to people in their roles, not those individuals per se. Also as it relates to the law department, I would say a couple things. One, generally my understanding is that that's not, it's usually the agencies that work with their specific contacts with the law department that bring them to the table. They're usually not, you don't reach out to them directly. But also, we did have a meeting last month where, we talked about a forum and, who to invite. And so, I mean, we could certainly add it to that conversation. But yeah.
Great. Thanks, Daryl. I see that. Okay. I was just looking at, because I know that Dr. Gary would like to make a comment. So Chanel, would you be able to unmute Dr. Gary? Okay, I know that you have a comment related to this particular topic and then a separate point about the resource directory. So go ahead on this particular topic and then we can move on to your other point.
Okay, thank you. Nice to see everybody. I just wanted to point out that DHS, the Department of Homeless Services, was not CC'd on the resolution or HRA, and it's sort of like just the elephant in the room. So DHS was at the meetings. They were part of the resolutions for a couple of years. So I just wanted to point that out for clarity's sake. And if everybody knows, I just think that's very important. Obviously now DHS falls under HRA. And so the other thing is that as part of the process, just when you guys were talking about the Department of Law, there was never a license that was produced from 1993 until 2002. So there was never a license that, because that was how we first met Alizé Beal in the Community Affairs Unit. So I feel like the history of the city being involved in this, I mean, it's all falling on you guys, but it's really about Manhattan Borough Community Affairs Unit that was involved since 2014. And they didn't know that the building was not owned by them. And then, Phil Zablocki did the foils and found out that's how this whole thing started, was that no one knew who owned the building. And that was when Aisha got everyone there. So that's just like, because we've been so involved in that, I just thought it'd be helpful to everyone to know that, as well as I'm just curious, and I think you already answered this. Do you know the new contact person, like the new Matt Borden? Is Matt Borden still there? I know that Jocelyn Carter is still, she stayed in position. We're in contact. I'm going to be in contact with Gary Jenkins and Mayor Eric Adams about this. So I just wanted to know if this committee has direct contact with the new DHS representative and also the Community Affairs Unit Manhattan Director. So that was what was related to this. I don't know if anyone could speak to that or just duly noted.
Thanks, Gary. In regards to your final point in regards to kind of being in contact, I'm new in this role and I haven't necessarily done any of kind of the liaising directly. So no. And again, I'm kind of acting in a acting chair position. So I don't know what will happen in terms of, what the format of the committee will look like. But again, in terms of the action points that I can take forward in my current capacity is following up as shared, making sure that the current elected officials do have kind of a refresh of the resolution and informing them that, hey, this is what we passed. Please refer to it. And again, we're kind of looking to have this forum in the late spring. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Thank you for that. Does the committee agree that DHS and CAU should be in part of this loop, since they were part of not knowing from the beginning about this building? Does the committee think that DHS should be informed about this?
So again, I don't know who was originally CC'd when the resolution was passed, because I wasn't, so if they weren't,
right, yeah,
then I think it would make sense for us to share it with them. And I'm sure we can do that, kind of for their awareness as it does involve them. Aisha, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
So I was just gonna, you answered part of what I was gonna say, but clearly DHS is the responsible entity. And so of course they should be in the loop about a resolution that, affects their purview. Dr. Gary, do you remember what Matt Borden's position was? Because we could pull it up on Green Book to find out who sits in that position now.
Director of Government, and I don't want to say it wrong, so it's just a confusing title, but something like the Government Affairs, and I'm not sure.
Okay.
Because it also
So
changed.
I'll check my emails and I'll find out. I'll see if I have anything with his exact title on it, and I'll see who sits in that now.
Do you know who the new Liliana Irvin is? Is the community board in contact with the new Manhattan CAU? I know it's a new person, but I haven't been in contact with them yet.
Again, I
believe
have
it's
not
still
been.
her.
Okay. Yeah, I'm kind of acting in this new role, so obviously I have
Okay,
a bit of
I
catching
don't
up
mean
to
to be
do.
asking like as a direct question. I'm just curious. I'm just encouraging the committee to have them engaged in this process since this started in 2014 with them and all of us.
For sure.
So,
Thank you
all
for
right.
that, Dr.
Thank
Gary.
you for that. And
I know
my
you had
other
a
part,
separate point.
yeah,
Please
yeah,
go ahead.
I'll get onto that. Thank you. So I think it's awesome what everyone's trying to do with the resource directory. And I think, I don't know how to have, yes, Richard, is it?
Richard, can you come in after Gary, or is it related to the previous point?
Related to the previous, I'm flexible. I'm not worried about when I speak.
Okay.
It's just
Okay.
trying to answer a question that came up.
Okay. Yeah. If you wouldn't mind coming in after Dr. Gary's point on the resource directory. Thanks.
So I didn't know how or when to chime in for the resource directory, but I think it is a great example. I think everyone made great points that to have an objective way to look at organizations, or everything was very hit home for me because growth and development services was left out of the resource manual, the current one. I'm sure you could notice that it's not there. For years, I have it documented, and we tried to ask them to add it. So I think it's a perfect example of how and who is chosen to be in the resource directory. And to add insult to injury, in January of 2019, when we had the meeting, GDS was left out of the letter to DHS Jocelyn Carter when the building was described. Again, I'm always advocating for the youth and the mental health services and the program we provide. And honestly, I'm still going to be contacting Jocelyn Carter because she's there. And I don't want growth and development services and all the volunteers and all the people that are part of our family and team to be erased from history. So we were left out of the resource directory. We were left out of the letter acknowledging all of the services that have been going on in the Armory since we moved into the building and built out raw space. So I just wanted to, I'm not trying to highlight anything about GDS besides say it's a perfect example of us being left out. And also I am documenting right here and now that GDS did exist from 2002 until 2019 when we were locked out. We actually existed since 1996. So thank you for that. Resource directory is a great idea.
Thank you, Dr. Gary. Richard, your point, please.
Yeah, I was just Googling to see what I could find out about Matt Borden. And what I pulled up was a LinkedIn profile of his, and he has not been with the Department of Homeless Services for the past 11 months. It would take a little more digging to find out who is in those positions.
Thanks. Phil, I'll take your last hand, and then let's, if there are hopefully no final points because it is almost 9 p.m. Phil, go ahead.
Just to read what I just put in the comments, Matthew Borden's title was Department of Social Services Assistant Commissioner for Government and External Affairs. I don't know who has the spot now. That was all. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Great. Thank you for joining this evening, and thank you to you as well, Dr. Gary. I think I saw some other attendees in the section. So thank you. Well, they've blocked off now, but thanks to them for joining earlier. Great. So with that, thank you everyone for your meeting. I'm assuming there's no other old business. Okay. If none, there's obviously a lot of exciting things that we're all working on. We talked a little bit about the resolution calling on the MBPO to work on or pull together that platform of community resources, and then also us ourselves kind of looking at what we can do immediately. We talked a little bit about the housing security / prevention community fair that we're looking to have, and possibly inviting some representatives from DHS and kind of the City Department of Veteran Services, kind of link in and kind of update us on the different resources that currently exist so that we ourselves are a bit more aware of what's going on. And then there's also a couple of action points on the foundation. So thank you, everyone. We'll be busy over the next couple of weeks, but thank you everyone for your time and for joining this evening. Can I get a motion to end
Really
the
quick
meeting?
before you end, just to keep it in this
Very
bucket
quickly.
before we leave. Matthew Borden is still listed in that same position. So either the green book has not been updated or he has not been replaced. So I just wanted to put that on the record.
Motion to adjourn.
Richard, very quickly, please.
Going to respond to that. I would guess not replaced because he's actually listed at another position in city government since March 2021 on his own LinkedIn profile.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
I think we can figure it out. It'll come
yes.
together. I'm not worried.
We will find out for
Okay.
sure. Daryl put a motion to adjourn the meeting. Can I get a second?
I second that.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Etta. I'll go ahead and take care of the minutes for this month, but would certainly appreciate a volunteer for March. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Have a good night.